Pad of Life has arrived, so it's time to give you all a refresher on the background of the event, giving us the Jotro of Arknights. Ulpanius has been a long-awaited NPC, and the story of his event will be told soon, TM. No, today we have a different mission, and instead of wasting your time with a massive preamble, we'll get down to business immediately, cause there's a lot to cover. And I'm gonna keep it 100,000 with you. I don't particularly care for the Abyssal Hunters, aside from the, shall we say, cultured art that they have produced. But I'll keep my biases in check. Mostly, I'm sure. Probably, maybe not. The story of the Abyssal Hunters is made up of 4 events, and 1 integrated strategies expansion. But for this video, we'll be primarily covering the 3 side stories that tell the story of our beloved hunters. Not that Cruella Harbor isn't worth covering, but it's primarily a what-if scenario involving a Seaborn apocalypse should Skadi fail to contain Ishar Malah. But that will probably not happen in the actual timeline, so it's just a nice bit of fluff. Maybe, if there's enough interest, I'll give it its own video discussing the lore surrounding that expansion. The lore of the Abyssal Hunter storyline is insanely deep, primarily because of that expansion. Arguably, it's the most interesting part of the world building of Arknights, next to the Doctor's race and the Collapsals. So, Abyssal Hunters and Ageir are probably where I should start this lore dump. These two are actually pretty simple concepts to explain. Ageir is Arknights' Atlantis, and the Abyssal Hunters are Arknights super soldiers. A bit more of an explanation is required, but that's the basics. Ageir is the most advanced civilization on Terra. We see plenty of that in Pad of Life. They inherited most of their technology from the Doctor's race, and using it they developed a thriving underwater society, separated from the petty conflicts of Terra and mostly isolated from the dangers of Originium. Their society could be considered a utopia by Terran standards, but they dug too greedily and too deep and awakened a great threat to Terra, the Seaborn. Initially, when facing only the lesser members of the Seaborn, the Aigirian government didn't take the threat seriously, not helped by the Church of the Deep being founded and spreading misinformation regarding the creatures. The attack of the Seaborns is what caused the first Aigirians to leave the sea and seek shelter on the land. The threat of the Seaborn was so great, they began the Abyssal Hunter project, genetically engineering super soldiers by combining Aigirians with Seaborns, and thus the Abyssal Hunters as we know them were born. Weapons handcrafted to kill Seaborns, and they were deployed en masse to kill a Leviathan, Ishar Malah. And it worked, somewhat. Like 99% of the Abyssal Hunters died, and the project was abandoned afterwards due to the absurdly low KD ratio, but they succeeded in killing the god. And that's pretty much the basics on Ageir and the Abyssal Hunters. We of course know quite a few of these hunters, so let's give you an introduction. Skadi, the white woman everyone sims for, Spectre, the mentally ill one, Gladia, the most attractive one and the one people should sim for, and Ulpanius, the dude one. Skadi should need no introduction, she's essentially the main character of the Abyssal Hunter storyline, and everyone who sims for her doesn't care about her lore anyway. Skadi has the remnants of Ishar Malah's mind trapped inside her, so at any given moment she might lose herself to an eldritch god and drown the land. This essentially is what happens in IS-3. Also, Skadi Alter is just a what if Ishar Malah wanted to fuck the Doctor as a unit. I think Skadi is okay. I never really got the hype around her, and the aspect of her that I find the most interesting, the Ishar Malah stuff, hasn't really gotten proper focus in an event. Yes, it was in Undertides, but I want more. It's fascinating. It's a really good dynamic for Skadi to have with basically everyone around her. Spectre is the mentally ill schizophrenic nun. She's a main focus of both Undertides and Stultifera Navis, playing the role of a damsel in distress in the first event and playing the role of recovering schizophrenic in the second. I think she's fantastic. I love her relationship with Irene, and I love her relationship with the other Abyssal Hunters. It's just something so great about swapping from Spectre to Laurentina that I find so enjoyable. Gladia is hot. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me. You should understand everything you need to from that sentence alone. And she's turning into a Seaborn, slowly but surely. A process that I am sure is urgent and will not be ignored going into the future. Ulpanius is the least focused on Abyssal Hunter. First appearing in Stultifera Navis, his main goal there was to prevent the other Abyssal Hunters from returning to Ageir. He, among all the Abyssal Hunters, recognizes the dangers of Skadi returning to the ocean. Just cause they killed Ishar Malah once doesn't mean they can do it again. So I'd say his fears are more than well founded. There'll probably be a lot more that I can say after Path of Life, but that isn't the focus of this video. Seaborn and the Church of the Deep are up next on this train ride. The Seaborn are water tyranids, and the Church of the Deep worships them. That's the TLDR of these two. The Seaborns are a hive mind entity that exists within the oceans of Terra. They are hyper-adaptive, consuming all around them and constantly evolving. Until Ageir antagonized them, they were mostly content staying away from humanity, having no particular reason to interfere with them. But upon discovery, this changed, and the Seaborn began to consume Ageir for information. The hive mind's collective consciousness is known as the Mani, and this entity was centralized within the Leviathan Seaborns. Massive creatures similar to a Fernmut in power and influence. They can control the Seaborn in a more focused way, as despite the hive mind, the Seaborn vary in intelligence quite wildly. Most of the Seaborn are mindless monsters, attacking all on sight, but certain Seaborn, like the End-Speaker, possess higher level intelligence, being capable of speech and communication with humans. This, combined with adding humans to their ranks, caused the Church of the Deep to come into existence, a cult that worships the Seaborn as gods, and wishes to see the world assimilated by the Mani to end suffering throughout Terra. There is of course more to say about the Seaborn and the Church, but this is what I would consider the necessary understanding. Just to once again drag it back to the Doctor's race, the Seaborn were once just a tool for terraforming, but of course they evolved beyond that into what they are today. And finally, Iberia and its Inquisition are the first and last line of defense against the Seaborn on Terra. A kingdom located at the south of Terra and once possessed power and influence similar to Victoria. The kingdom is now a shell of its former self. Iberia was once Terra's predominant maritime nation, controlling vast quantities of the sea and possessing an incredibly powerful navy, all of which was symbolized by the mighty eyes of Iberia, enormous lighthouses that shone the light of civilization across Terra's waters. That was until the Seaborn arrived. Initially, most within Iberia dismissed the threat. The warnings of the Ageir who fled from them were nothing but ramblings of a minority. As such, the Church of the Deep infiltrated the nation of Iberia quite easily. Then, the profound silence came. A giant tsunami that washed away the Golden Age as if it was nothing more than a child's sandcastle. The aftermath of the silence was severe. Much of Iberia sank beneath the waves. The Seaborn rendered much of the coastline uninhabitable, and the Golden Age of Iberia would come to an end with a whimper. Luckily, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, the Church survived. The Iberian Inquisition was formed to restore societal stability. Saint Carmen would lead Iberia into the future, although it would not be a hopeful one. If you've ever read about Warhammer 40k or Fantasy Inquisitors, you can imagine what things they could get away with. Effectively, everything. Religious persecutions against the Aigerian immigrants, suppressing knowledge of the Seaborn, mass purges to prevent the spread of corruption. You know, typical inquisitorial things. But baby girl Irene is a member of the Inquisition. Kinda. Not really anymore. But she's great. A young, inexperienced Inquisitor in training, learning to confront the necessity of her doctrine and expand her worldview. Honestly, my favorite character featured in the Abyss Hunter storyline. And speaking of, the required reading. Like I said before, there are now 4 events in the storyline. Technically 3 if you really want to be pedantic, but I don't think I'll get a chance to talk about it if I don't talk about it here. Grani and the Knight's Treasure, Undertides, Stultifera Navis, and Path of Life. Of which Path of Life will be getting its own video next week, so we can skip it for today. Now, these probably won't be as in-depth as some dedicated video on them, but this is trying to get you up to speed for Path of Life, so consider it a refresher. Starting off with Arknights' first ever side story, Grani and the Knight's Treasure. Being the first ever event in Arknights, this story hasn't particularly aged well. Not that it's terrible, but it's definitely a product of its time. If nothing else, it's short, which isn't something you can say about many Arknights events nowadays. It's only about an hour long in total, about a tenth of what Arknights' latest story chapter was. So, if you haven't read it, you should definitely give it a go. This event serves to set up a lot of things that will become relevant to the Abyssal Hunters storyline later on. Although, it would be literal years before we learn that, so I'm gonna tell you about it now, cause it's important. The story follows our titular character, Grani, as she works to save a Casimirian village from bounty hunters. They have come in search of a fabled knight's treasure, and that's basically the title explained. Not a very complicated one, huh? Regardless, that treasure belongs to none other than the last knight, a fabled knight of Casimirs who battled the very tides themselves. Yeah, it's a Don Quixote reference, but that very knight would come into play 2 events from now as a Seaborn corrupted monstrosity battling against the will of the many. The treasure is hidden somewhere in the mountains surrounding the village, with the bounty hunters harassing a local village chief, Carol, for information. She is luckily rescued by Grani, who quickly drives away the bounty hunters and promises to retrieve the treasure first to protect it from them. With Carol and Grani on their way to the treasure, one Skadi enters the scene. Skadi is a walking catastrophe, defeating any bounty hunter she meets with ease while searching for the treasure. Truly a level 100 boss versus level 1 crook matchup. While Grani and Carol escape from Skadi, they run into my glorious king, Big Bob, a kind man who offers to help them in their quest with absolutely no ill intentions. Together the trio make for the cave containing the treasure, battling against bounty hunters and Skadi along the way. Despite being Rhodes Island colleagues, Grani is attacked by Skadi because Skadi is clearly too autistic to explain why she needs the treasure. But Skadi serves as a suitable distraction for the bounty hunters, so they get away from her. Upon reaching the cave, the trio are surrounded by bounty hunters and members of Reunion. Bob valiantly stays behind to allow for Grani and Carol to find the treasure, but Grani returns to help him, getting back just in time to see Skadi carving a path of destruction through bounty hunters and Reunion alike. Skadi and Grani team up to drive the 2 groups off before going searching for Carol. What they find is Bob and the Reunion members attempting to claim the treasure for themselves. Bob is a former member of Reunion, and just wants the treasure to fund his future life in Colombia. Ideally, he wouldn't even need to hurt Carol and Grani, but given the situation, he won't sacrifice the future of those who followed him just for them. Grani and Skadi combine their might again to quickly defeat Bob, who surrenders. But the treasure requires a key to open it, one that would require the blood of a Casimirian. Carol intends to sacrifice herself, but Grani does it for her, saving Carol's life and only losing a relatively small amount of blood. And so, Grani saved the village. She and Skadi deal with the remaining bounty hunters. Bob and Carol split the treasure between themselves, with Carol using her share to repair the village, and Bob using his to take his men towards a new future in Colombia. After returning to Rhodes Island with the treasure key in hand, Skadi meets with Calcit. Skadi and Calcit form a tentative alliance due to their common interest in helping Spectre. So, by the end of the event, the Abyssal Hunters have begun their cooperation with Rhodes Island in earnest, and the key has been acquired. The key would play its future role in Stultifera Navis, where it could be used aboard the ancient ship. Cool fun fact as well, this was the event that introduced Mudrock, from a letter that Bob sent to her at the very end of the event. Pretty cool, small little Easter egg I suppose, and it just shows that Mudrock has been planned for quite a while before she was initially introduced. Moving swiftly along, Undertides, the event that gave us Skadi Alter, and the first real introduction to the currently developing story of the Abyssal Hunters. The event opens with Gladia appearing before Skadi. She takes the currently unconscious Spectre with her away from Rhodes Island, to the city of Salviento, on the coast of Iberia. So Skadi beelines it directly for the city, not sure what to expect now that her thought to be dead superior has abducted her last connection to home. The Inquisition is also on their way towards Salviento, silencing anyone spreading misinformation about a mysterious bishop or strange humanoid monsters. Such things don't exist, you understand. After arriving in Salviento, Skadi notices that it's not exactly the most upbeat place. Something is wrong within the city, but she can't put her finger on what just yet. She's attacked almost immediately upon entering the city, but she is a literal super soldier and some starving citizens aren't going to be a threat for her. But she does make a new friend, a young local girl, Anita. All the while, she is being observed by Gladia and the previously mentioned bishop. After settling in somewhat, Skadi begins exploring the coast of Salviento, where she learns more of the culture. Some nights they receive a gift from the ocean, which requires one of them to be chosen as a sacrifice. That's pretty concerning, but not as concerning as Irene bursting onto the scene, and yes, I am using her old sprite here because the contrast is funny to me. She, at this point, is pretty brash and headstrong, and she pretty quickly starts abusing her powers in order to aid her investigation. Doing this, she discovers Skadi, and negotiations break down rather quickly, resulting in the two fighting. Well, more of Skadi trying not to hurt Irene, but she's doing her best. During this, High Inquisitor Dario makes his appearance. He performs much better against Skadi, forcing her to flee with Irene giving chase. Skadi and Irene are about to come to blows again when they are interrupted by the timely arrival of the Seaborn, with the two battling the monsters till morning. Irene has gained a reluctant respect for Skadi at this point, but both are horrified to see the starving populace begin consuming the Seaborn after the battle is over. The Seaborn have provided their gift, and the chosen sacrifice has been made. So, things here are clearly worse than Skadi or the Inquisition expected. Dario at least apprehended the chosen sacrifice before they could actually go through with it. Not that they survived, you know, inquisitorial mercy and all that. That night, while Skadi plays some music for the locals, the coming of the tide brings the true gift of the Seaborn. Food from the ocean. Not just the leftover corpses of Seaborn. The Bishop, Quintus, and Gladia appear before the locals, and while Quintus performs a sermon, Skadia confronts Gladia. Although she doesn't get any real answers, she follows the pair to the Church of Salviento for a proper confrontation. Before that, the Inquisition is preparing to bomb the city to remove the corruption at its source. Irene disagrees with this approach and moves to evacuate the city. Dario allows this as this is part of the maturing process of a young Inquisitor. And shortly after Irene departs on her mission, the old cat of Rhodes Island appears before Dario. After Skadi arrived at the church, she was taken to see Spectre. They had been experimenting on her to discover the secrets of the Abyssal Hunters and the Ageir's reaction to Originium. Gladia drops the friend act at this point and attempts to attack Quintus, but is quickly impaled by a Seaborn. The first to talk then reveals to Skadi the reality of the Abyssal Hunters. They are Ageir Seaborn hybrids. Combining this with revealing that the mind of Ishamala now resides within Skadi almost pushes her mind to the breaking point. Skadi almost accepts becoming a Seaborn. However, Gladia was waiting for an opportunity to strike and attacks the first to talk, successfully killing the creature. Quintus tries to act like he's a big threat to the hunters by transforming into a Seaborn himself. However, with Spectre awake, the three hunters get to jumping him. He never even stood a chance. And so, the hunters emerged from the church victorious. Calcid shows up and has Monster obliterate the church for good measure. After the dust settles, Calcid explains the dire situation facing Iberia, willingly sacrificing herself to inquisitorial imprisonment so that the Abyssal Hunters could return to Rhodes Island. Before leaving, Skadi shares a few words with Irene, the young Inquisitor having a newfound respect for the Hunter, which would follow her into the next event. Skadi also leaves Anita with her harp. The two likely will not meet again, so it'll be something to remember Skadi by. Back in Rhodes Island, we get a little bit more setup for our future storyline. Gladia has scales on her neck. She is slowly becoming a Seaborn. Her mission to find her way back to Ageir has taken on new urgency, although I'm sure she will be fine. In order to achieve her goal, she will need to find a lost treasure from Iberia's history, the Stultifera Navis. And so the Inquisition and the Abyssal Hunters find themselves in the city of Gran Faro. Ever since the Profound Silence, the town has been devastated. The Inquisition crackdown on the town is especially hard due to the large presence of Ageirians in the city. Regardless, it was the town's closest to the great lighthouses, so it is a necessary first step. Calcid and St. Carmen arrived early to retrieve the key found in Grani's event from Alive Until Sunset, and give it to the hunters. Fun fact, Alive Until Sunset are foreign mutts that were chased out of the sea by the Seaborn. The hunters had officially been allowed to enter the country and were being escorted by Irene and Dario. The hunters take the key and begin their search for the ancient ship. Unfortunately, Gran Faro has been infiltrated by the Church of the Deep. The mayor Taigo and his adopted son Jordi, or Operator Lumen, needed to protect the town from disaster as both the Inquisitors and Seaborn have bad intentions. Thiago wishes to protect his son as he is the ancestor of those who built the lighthouses. Thiago has no faith in the Inquisition after they took Lumen's parents away. The Seaborn begins their attack and spread the Netherseas brand, which spreads their corruption and births more Seaborn. While all that is going on, Dario confronts Ulpanius. But it's just Ulpanius testing the Inquisitor's strength before he makes his way towards the Stultifera Navis. The Seaborn attack has brought the timeline up, so the Abyssal Hunters need to make their way towards the lighthouse immediately. Lumen offers his aid to Coleman in exchange for him defending Grand Pharaoh, which is acceptable terms for Coleman. So, Coleman and Calcid remain in the city, while the Abyssal Hunters, Lumen, Irene, and Dario sail for the lighthouse to locate the Great Ship. The battle to retake the lighthouse is an uphill one. The Seaborn and Netherseas brand is corroding the lighthouse. In addition to that, the last knight is present and attacking the Great Work. Lumen and Irene clear the inside and make their way towards the control room to activate it. Spectre immediately picks a fight with the last knight, and the other hunters and Dario set to work killing the Seaborn. Lumen does succeed in activating the lighthouse, and they discover the ship is nearby. Irene decides to be the one to observe this next step for Iberia and journeys with the Abyssal Hunters to the Stultifera Navis. Meanwhile, Dario and Lumen remain at the lighthouse to defend it till reinforcements arrive, immediately coming under attack. But the ship is our main focus, so upon boarding the ship, our squad immediately came under attack by Seaborn as well. Not that such a thing is really a threat to anyone besides Irene. Scotty, Spectre, and Irene head for the main hall, while Gladia takes the knight's key to the engine room. While battling through the ship, Spectre's originium-induced schizophrenia is suppressed by the sea's influence, allowing for Laurentina to once again battle alongside her comrades. She's still quite crazy, but you know, normal crazy, like using her saw blade as a mode of transportation crazy. After reaching the main hall, the trio discover the captain of the ship, Alfonso, and his first mate, Garcia. They had been trapped aboard the ship since the Great Silence and have survived by consuming the Seaborn. Most of the crew killed themselves before becoming monsters, but these two have held on. Alfonso is in pretty good shape, all things considered. He's mostly still human. Garcia, on the other hand, has almost completely become a Seaborn, but the love the two share keep them human even in this reduced state. Alfonso doesn't wish to cooperate with Iberia, having grown resentful in his decades of being stranded. Luckily, Alfonso and Laurentina possess the crazy-to-crazy communication that is required for them to reach an understanding. Because right around that time, the End Speaker presents itself, wishing to nourish its kin, which right now consists of everyone except Irene and a member of the Church of the Deep. Speaking of, Amaya. She's a woman from Grand Pharaoh and another bishop of the Church of the Deep. She summons the Netherseas brand to devour the ship and prevent the hunters' return to Ageir. The End Speaker tries unsuccessfully to turn Scotty back into Ishamala, but if you were this sexy woman dressed in a nun outfit around you, you would also reject godhood. So Alfonso, Scotty, Spectre, and Irene begin hunting the End Speaker. It tries to go after Irene and learns an important lesson. Bullets hurt, and is forced to retreat. While all that is going down, a JoJo's reference is happening, which we can all agree is more important. Gladia confronts Ulpanius in the engine room. Ulpanius had infiltrated Grand Pharaoh and aided the Church of the Deep in finding the Stultifera Navis. He had no interest in joining a cult, but wished to stop the other hunters from returning to Ageir. He fears Ishamala, and wishes to prevent Scotty from dooming their people. Honestly, kinda reasonable, but Glady has to run his pockets for pulling this stunt, and so the two approach each other menacingly. In hindsight, this CG essentially being Dio pulling up on Jotaro is super funny considering Jotaro's voice actor would become Ulpanius's. He's the best JoJo, by the way. While we are taking a break from the action of the Stultifera Navis, let's cover Dario and Lumen's fate right now. It's not looking good. Dario burned the Seaborn horrors away using his lantern, but he has succumbed to his wounds. Lumen, on the other hand, acquires a boat and sets sail for the Stultifera Navis, going to reunite with the Abyssal Hunters and Irene. Unsure as to what he'll find, but knowing his presence will be needed. Around that time, Calcid and Carmen arrive at the lighthouse. Paying their respects to Dario, the two secure the lighthouse for Iberia. Back aboard the ship, things aren't looking good. Alfonso and Garcia aren't in the best shape and are at risk of succumbing to the Mani. Irene is reeling from the revelation of her mentor's death, but presses on regardless. Although due to the evolving nature of the End Speaker, she is quickly being outclassed. The Abyssal Hunters regroup to defeat the End Speaker with 4 of them on the job. That should be relatively easy. However, the End Speaker consumes Amaya and ascends into a higher stage of evolution. Ulpanius is immediately placed on fraud watch by the creature and thrown overboard, leaving the others to battle this monstrosity. In a pitched battle, the group is forced to detonate the Stultifera Navis to destroy the creature. Alfonso does it himself and dies at the blast. Garcia, regaining the will to resist the Mani, restrains the End Speaker, and as the two sink into the depths, Ulpanius appears to finish both of them off. Irene is saved from drowning by Laurentina and becomes the first member of the Inquisition and Iberia in general to lay eyes upon an Aigirian city, one that is way too close to the shore. Ageir is losing the war against the Seaborns badly and have been driven further and further away from their original homes. Right around that time, Lumen appears on his little boat and rescues the stranded group. Following his actions during their crisis, Lumen is recruited into the Inquisition, the first Aigirian to become a member. Irene, however, decides to leave the organization. She doesn't believe that she can mend the bonds between the Aigirians and Iberians if she remains a member, and Carmen respects her decision. Irene will no doubt be essential in upcoming Ageir-Iberia relations. The Abyssal Hunters are also in a pretty uncomfortable spot. Ulpanius is probably returning to Ageir, and the other 3, although they failed to return to Ageir, are somewhat content with it, knowing that there is a giant catastrophe waiting for them when they do return. And that, my friends, essentially leads into Path of Life. The return of the Abyssal Hunters to the Ageir and the first contact between Iberia and the civilization beneath the waves. Is the story of the Abyssal Hunters perfect? No, but now that I've gone back over it since writing that intro, I think I like it a bit more. Specifically, Stultifera Navis. I may have been a little harsh on it before, but if I was, it was just me character developing into this point of quite liking it. No fancy outro this time, I got Path of Life scripting to do. Y'all be good people, and I'll see you in the next one.